Hey everyone, welcome back to the ECAPS Watch podcast. Actually, I don't know, we're on maybe a transition period here. We might be changing the name along with some legislation name change. So I'm Kevin Houlihan, CEO at Workflow Services. I'm super excited today to have back as a return guest on the podcast, Mike Wysong. Mike is the Chief Executive Officer of CARE Pharmacy Cooperative, one of the largest independent pharmacy groups in the US with about 170 locations nationwide. And he's also, very importantly, a respected voice in pharmacy, and worth noting was the NACDS chair for the 2023-2024 term and remains super engaged with NACDS. So Mike, excited to talk to you again. Thanks for coming back. There is tons happening in the news, and I think you're the perfect person to be talking to us today with the advancement through the House committee last week. But you're one of the more interesting guys I know, and I love listening to your stories, Mike. So before we even dive into that on the personal front, I have been spending some time at high school graduation parties for family friends. So it's graduation season. And I know you've been out having some graduation escapades. So I'd love to hear what's going on with you.
Kevin, I appreciate that. I appreciate you also having me back here this morning. I laugh. The Wysongs have been through 4 college graduations. And I finally had an opportunity to be the commencement speaker, I guess 2 weeks ago at Mount St. Mary's College here in Emmitsburg, Maryland. So it was quite an honor.
So what is your connection to the college, and why in the world are they having you do the commencement?
I know, right? Who would have me come in and do a speech? So the story is actually quite humorous. I start back at my time at VMI when I was a biology major. I picked biology because it didn't have a foreign language requirement. I just didn't know that organic chemistry was a foreign language. And so the colonel, the worse he treated you, the more he liked you, and he treated me pretty tough. So he calls me into his office one day. He goes, "Mike, you're never going to be a doctor. You got to pass organic chemistry as a prereq for med school, which you got to go to be a doctor. So I know you're working hard here, so I'm going to graduate you, but promise me when you graduate, you never go into healthcare." So, of course, Kevin, I graduate. I had aspirations of going into the military, but Desert Storm was winding down, so there was nowhere to go. So I took the first job I could get, which was at Baxter Healthcare in medical surgical. So after a decade and a half, I finally became the CEO of CARE Pharmacies. And the colonel writes me a handwritten note and says, "Mike, I'm super proud of you, but you didn't keep your promise and you're still never going to be a doctor." So I laugh. So, of course, when you give the commencement address, they give you an honorary doctorate degree. So it only took 33 years to be a doctor. So that's the long and the short of the story. But the reason I was asked, the Wysongs every summer go on vacation. And in 2023, we were down in the shores of Carolina Beach. And on the third day, I have this 22-year-old kid sitting next to me. And I go, "Hey, why are you here? You've been sitting next to me for like 3 straight days." And he said, "Mike, I finally just worked up the courage to ask you. I've got an idea and a pitch I want to run by you." I go, "All right, well, let me hear it."
He goes, "One of your kids' friends?"
It was one of the kids' friends who I surmise had a dating interest in one of our daughters. So, pitching me was more important than spending time with the prospective girlfriend. But anyway, he goes, "I'm a soccer player at Mount St. Mary's College up in Emmitsburg," which I knew where it was. And he goes, I want to invent insoles that heat and cool." So, okay, well, that's a pretty cool idea. He goes, "Can I give you the pitch?" So he gives me the pitch. I'm like, "Your pitch is terrible. The concept of the product has some legs, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to make that happen." So I said, "We'll get together after the vacation and we'll figure it out." So the kid showed up at my house every other week for a year and a half and was able to get the patent. And the name of the company is Elos, which is soul spelled backwards.
Okay, I like
And so I said to him, I go, "Well, who's on the side of your business school? What's the name of the gentleman on the side of the business school?" And he goes, "Well, it's the Palmieri Center of Entrepreneurship." And of course, it's a small industry. And so I knew Paul. And so we were able to kind of circle around the opportunity, and the product became available in distribution. So from the concept of getting the patent to bringing it into being. So that's pretty cool. And then shortly after that, I was at the CHIP event, and my good friend Brooks Powell and his wife Shelby won the new product of consumer health with a digital campaign under $5 million. And he came to the table and I hugged Brooks. I said, I can't tell you how proud I am of you. But Brooks, you can't keep coming to the shows with your Hawaiian polo shirt on and your, fancy colored shoes. And I go, I'm going to fly down to Texas. I'm going to buy you a custom made suit because I love custom made suits. And every time you win, you'll know that I love you and your personal brand will be in line with your professional brand.
Mm-hmm.
So he was appreciative of that. And he goes, hey, Mike, while we're being nice to each other, can I tell you something? I go, yeah. He goes, you know, a lot of people in our industry, but you could leverage some of the social media platforms like LinkedIn to really connect back to tell some of your stories and to pull the next group of providers through. I said, all right, Brooks, I'll let you mentor me on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. So, of course, I have no idea what to post on LinkedIn. That's not in my general expertise. And so the first post I put together is a terrible post. And Brooks responds with D-, too long. So on about the 12th version, I linked in and sent the story about me meeting Thunowin Garcia on the Wysong vacation and our good friend Glenn Nermoyle, the CEO and, prime force behind New Fabrics, which is another large consumer product company, read that post and ultimately acquired Elos.
Amazing.
And so Mount St. Mary's had their first patent and exit event in the history of the Palmieri Center of Entrepreneurship. And so they said, all right, Mike, to celebrate, we want you to be the commencement speaker. And we're going to honor you with the honorary doctorate degree. So quite a full circle moment for me on multiple fronts.
I mean, so awesome. Yeah, you're certainly a Renaissance man. And I think it speaks to a lot of lives that you, supported or touched or influenced in a positive way. So awesome. Like, very, admirable, inspirational for me personally.
Well, I appreciate that. The truth is we have a pretty special industry. We have a lot of really good people trying to serve their customers. And I always laugh. It's always the opposite of what you think. I was having this conversation with Dan Mack. It's paradox theory where, sometimes in an attempt to be nice to other people, you get way more out of it than what you were putting into it. Yeah. And so, I ended up getting a doctorate degree. I ended up getting mentored by, two young kids that I was trying to mentor. And I think I ended up getting way more out of all that than they did. But
yeah,
it's kind of funny how it works.
So what was, I want one more question about the speech. Was there a sentiment that you tried to leave the audience or the graduates with?
Yeah. So, Mount St. Mary's is the second oldest Catholic institution in the country, right behind the lesser known one down in DC called Georgetown.
I hadn't heard of that.
If you've ever heard of that. So, I love art. And so I really wanted to do a metaphor between the religious theme of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But I did it under the premise of faith, responsibility, and perseverance. And as painters, if we paint with faith, responsibility, and perseverance, then there's opportunity all around. And usually you can paint something really beautiful if you use those three primary colors. And then if you look for opportunity, that's usually a suitable frame. So yeah. I think it was well received. It was a nice way of making the point without making it a sermon.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take that, and I think we've actually got a reasonable segue thinking about faith, responsibility, and perseverance. Let's talk about this legislation that we've been focused on, which is the expanded recognition of pharmacists under the eyes of Medicare. And I think we've had faith that it can happen. We feel it's the responsible thing to do, and we're persevering to see it through. The big news last week was that it advanced through the House committee that held it through a hearing. And I know that you've been super engaged, and we connected after that happened, and you said that you've been involved in what's been going on, but more was going to be happening this week. And I think you said you spent some time in DC earlier this week. So I'd love to start with just a quick rundown of what the advancement last week means, what you think comes next, what else you're hearing, what happened this week, what should we be looking for?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You and I spoke back at the beginning of the year as all of this was kind of taking shape. And I made mention in my commencement speech about, potential. And as a kid at some point in time and as a parent, you hope you don't refer to it as potential anymore because it's actually become a thing.
Right.
And I think, ECAPS is certainly on its way to being what it could and should be. So there's been some pretty good progress made over those last couple of months. You saw that, I think it was on the 21st when Jason Smith, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, was able to put that through and get it through. So this thing is on its way to being something. And so I'm pragmatically optimistic that as this thing continues to take life, that it's going to end up in a place that's favorable for the people that would benefit most from it. So I think we're headed in the right place. I think the biggest state of affairs from the last time we talked to today is that there's been real progress made on that, which I'm happy for.
Yeah. So just in terms of, this is, I feel like we're back in like elementary school, but how these things turn into like how the process of lawmaking works. So the Ways and Means Committee in the House, I think there's one more committee that it needs to go through in the House, and then it would go to the House floor for a vote. Can you talk a little bit about do I have that right? How long and when would those happen? How would they happen?
You have that exactly right. I mean, if you look at what happened, I was actually on a call with Congressman Smith, a couple weeks ago, just kind of talking through some of the possibilities on that. Obviously, they changed the name of the bill to be more reflective, I think, and more impactful. Candidly, ECAPS is, difficult for folks that maybe aren't operating in the space to remember what that an acronym is. So changing that to the, Main Street Pharmacy Access Act, I think is a little more demonstrative and representative of the importance that pharmacy plays in small town, rural towns from an access perspective and a capabilities perspective. That will then have to go through the governance committee. The next committee will have to pick that up and pass it through. My sense is, Kevin, that that's likely going to happen, right? I think there's great support through the two committees that will ultimately have to oversee that before it goes to the House committee and then ultimately to the Senate.
Okay.
So I think we're headed in the right direction, and I don't see, from my perspective, a lot of detractors from it. I don't think that this isn't one of those that's got a lot of headwind to it, which I think is a good thing. There's a lot of support for it.
Yeah, and I was able to watch the hearing on it on YouTube, which is cool. And I haven't done a ton of that in my life, and so it was interesting to hear those messages. And I think folks in the room were sort of learning in real time and expressing some opinions. And there was a little bit of like, well, there are things that in the future that I worry about, but I think the way that this bill is constructed, those worries are sort of addressed. And so I don't have to worry about, what's sitting in front of us here. So I thought that was great. I know it's impossible to predict, and, in any sort of crystal ball you have, what do you think on when might the next committee take it up and timelines on things?
Well, if you look at it, this thing would have to get through by the end of the year. Obviously, the big question mark are the midterm elections, which isn't a significant amount of uncertainty there in terms of what would happen. But this thing would have to get in and get passed, I think, by the 2nd or 3rd of January, and until you had to basically start this thing over. So I think there is some time. I think there's some work left to do on the outside of this in terms of continuing to support it from a consumer perspective and a potential, just on the outside for people that are looking at it that would benefit from it. I think we have a lot of work left to do to continue to support it. But to me, this is probably going to be more, okay, what does this legislation get attached to? Can both sides of the political aisle come to an agreement that this is legislation that should be passed before the year expires? So I can't tell you. I've been a part of other legislation that I go, man, this stuff's going to go through, and then something derails it or something happens at the last minute. But for where this is, I'm pragmatically optimistic. I think we're doing all the right things. I know the trade associations have a keen interest in making sure that this gets passed and is done in a way that's commensurate with the people, again, that would benefit from these services and codifying it. So I think for where we are, the progress is positive, and I feel pretty good about it.
Well, one thing that I really like, I agree that the name change is just a little bit more, I don't know, intuitive for people, or explains a little bit more what's going on. I do like that there's access in there. And I think that was an interesting thing that came up, that this is really not about some brand new thing that who knows if pharmacies can do it. This is a thing that's tried and true and proven for many, many years. And it's just about giving more people access to this kind of care. And so I like that part of it. And I like that part of the conversation in the room last week.
Yeah, and I do too. I don't think that the ask here is an overreaching ask in the states that you could do this. I think the real benefit as providers it would give us some real world data and some real world statistics to be able to prove the impact that pharmacy can have and address some of these access issues simultaneously. Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing for our profession and obviously for the senior citizens that would benefit from the accessibility.
Yeah. So you were in DC this week. Any more that you can share about what's going on there or things that you're hearing or?
I think there's a heightened sense amongst the groups there that this is important to pharmacy. It's important to the folks that again would benefit from these services. I don't think that that the ask is an overreaching ask. I think it's another demonstration of pharmacy's capacity and capability to fill a gap of care here and to formalize that with a payment structure.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like it is important to pharmacy, but what I'm encouraged by is a little bit more broad recognition. It seems that it's more important to care delivery for the folks in the country, right? Forget about pharmacy or doctor or whatever, like more access to care. And the pharmacy is just in such an amazing place to be able to help with that care problem. And so, man, let's just take the restraints off and let this thing roll. You know what I mean? Like I'm excited about that part of it.
I think you have that exactly right. And I think, just from my vantage point, having talked to lots and lots of people, both on the political side of this, from the trade association, from the retailers, that there is a unilateral agreement that should happen, that there's no real reason that this legislation should be kept up from being enacted.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that continues to have really strong bipartisan support, which is exciting and I think promising and encouraging. What should our listeners and viewers do? What can I do?
I would say continue to stay active. For folks in the states that this once enacted would benefit, I think hearing from those potential folks is super important in terms of the Congress people that preside over those areas. So I think now is the time to make sure that the voices are heard in the areas of opportunity. That's what I would do. And I could tell you as the CEO of CARE, we're going to be doing everything we can so that the people that represent the geographies where our stores are located know that we're accessible and ready to continue to do that. Yeah. And then our involvement at NACDS and NCPA and some of the other trade associations that we're doing everything we can to bolster those initiatives as well.
Yeah.
I think it's really important.
Yeah, it is really important. And I feel like we're close and everyone, there's a growing understanding of the value here and a growing understanding that this is just like a win across the board. So it feels like the time, I also am excited. I'm excited to hear that you're cautiously and optimistic, but I think also realistically optimistic. And so I hope, thanks for coming back on. I hope we're doing it again really soon when it gets to the next phase.
That's what I was going to say to you. You and I spoke at the beginning of the year, and I think we've made some real progress since then. And my hope is the next time we speak again, we'll look back at this one and go, all right, we're decidedly further along through this process out in the House and out in the Senate.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note, I think you've got support there, right? So all the way up the chain of command, the real question is all right, can we get this thing through without getting it tied to something else or getting derailed in the process with all the things that are going on down in the nation's capital?
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, Mike, thanks for coming back and joining. I hope that we'll see you again here very soon as this process continues to advance. But thanks for sharing your story in the beginning. We're at the beginning of the summer. I hope you have a great one planned out ahead. And it's great to have you back as a guest.
It's always an honor to be on your podcast here, and it was cool to be able to be a doctor on this one.
There you go, Dr. Wysong. Thanks again. All our viewers. We'll talk to you next time on the next episode.
Thanks, Kevin Houlihan.
Thanks.